Welcome to Daily News Channel. Please don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. Let's get started. So, things are heating up between Israel and Iran lately, with all the military drama going down. Word is Israel dropped some precise strikes on military sites in Iran. On the flip side, Iran put out a statement saying their air defenses handled most of the incoming missiles, but yeah, there were some injuries. They also made it clear they've got every right to defend themselves, hinting that payback might be on the way. Meanwhile, a bunch of Arab countries are weighing in, playing it cool. Saudi Arabia and the UAE put out their usual, "We're against this kind of" statements, calling for restraint and sticking to international laws. Gulf countries seem to be taking a step back from this mess to keep things chill in their neck of the woods. Jordan's government also made sure to let everyone know they didn't let their airspace get used for any of these attacks, showing they're trying to dodge the drama too. Over in the UK, the government is saying this whole thing isn't doing anyone any favors, and they're urging everybody to chill out. Reports coming from Iran are saying that these attacks were carried out with planes staying outside of Iranian airspace coming in through Iraq and Syria. Sources say Israel targeted defense systems and key sites in Iran to mess with their air defenses and cut down their response options. Some folks are calling this an attempt to blind Iran's defenses, just in case things pop off later. And according to the American magazine Axios, there might have been some behind-the-scenes talks between Israel and Iran before the strike even happened, which raises a lot of eyebrows about what's really going on. Some analysts are saying Israel did this just to save face, given all the heat they're getting on the Lebanese front. At the end of the day, this whole thing looks like a political balancing act. Both Israel and Iran are playing their cards carefully, especially with the US elections coming up and the potential return of Trump. Everyone's just trying to keep things from spiraling out of control, but who knows how long that'll last. So, yeah, Israel's moves have got folks all over trying to figure out what their game plan is. They went in with strikes but didn't hit any big oil facilities or nuclear sites, which makes people wonder if they were just flexing a little without really wanting to start a full-on war. Like they had to do something, but not too much, you know? Meanwhile, Iran's sitting there talking about how they saw it coming and saying that most of Israel's missiles didn't even do much damage. They're basically framing it like, yeah, they tried, but we were ready. And they're throwing some shade Israel's way, claiming this was more of a psychological move than an actual military win. Some insiders in Iran even called out the rumors about Israel using 100 jets as pure cap, saying Israel's just trying to make themselves look tougher than they really are. They're insisting the whole thing was way smaller than the hype, and they're rolling their eyes at Israel acting like they've got this whole thing under control. And if that wasn't messy enough, the strike supposedly included taking out radars in Iraq and Syria, which sucks for those countries because now they're caught in the crossfire. It's a pretty wild reminder of how these big regional beefs can spill over into places that aren't even directly involved. It's kind of sad seeing Iraq and Syria in this state after all the chaos they've been through, and now Israel's jets are just flying through their airspace like it's nothing. Some people are even calling it straight up disrespectful given how strong their armies used to be back in the day. But back to the nitty-gritty, Israel supposedly hit a bunch of Iran's air defenses and some missile production facilities. If that's true, it's a big deal, and definitely not something Iran's gonna take lightly. There's also talk that Israel did this in two phases. First, hitting radars to blind Iran's air defenses, and then going in for more strategic strikes. And, oh yeah, let's not forget the scoop Axios dropped. Apparently, Israel gave Iran a heads up before the attack, basically saying, hey, we're gonna hit you, but don't freak out too much. That's got conspiracy vibes all over it, and some people are calling it a staged move just so Israel doesn't look weak for not responding to Iran's threats. In the end, it's looking like both sides are trying to save face without sparking something they can't control. Israel's got its eyes on keeping regional dominance, while Iran's trying to keep up its tough guy image and get its nuclear game on lock before any serious US pressure comes their way. It's a crazy situation, and with so many moving pieces, who knows what's gonna happen next? Both Israel and Iran are playing the long game here, and everyone's watching to see who blinks first. So now everyone's waiting to see if Iran's actually gonna clap back or just let this slide. On the streets, people are mixed. Some think Iran's just biding its time, getting all their ducks in a row before they hit back hard. Others think they might hold off, focusing more on that nuclear buildup so they can flex later with some serious leverage. And speaking of that, the whole nuclear game is a massive deal. Iran's been steadily pushing towards becoming a legit nuclear power, kind of like North Korea did, where once they got the bomb, nobody's even thinking about messing with them directly. If Iran pulls that off, it could totally flip the script in the region and put Israel and the US in a whole new bind. For now, though, Israel's not trying to take any big swings that might blow up in their face. They've got their hands full with other stuff, like the situation in Lebanon, where they've been taking some major hits. Word is, the number of casualties and injuries on that front is way higher than Israel's used to dealing with, and it's got them rethinking how deep they want to get in there. That's why some analysts think Israel's move on Iran was more about showing they're still in charge without making things too messy right now. It's like they're trying to juggle a bunch of issues at once: Lebanon, Gaza, internal politics, and of course, keeping an eye on Trump's possible comeback in the US, since that could change everything. Trump's been super anti-Iran, so if he gets back in office, Israel might sit back and let the US take the lead on any heavy hits against Iran's nuclear sites. But all this isn't just about Israel and Iran. Behind the scenes, Gulf countries are doing everything they can to stay out of it. They're low-key relieved that Israel's targeting Iran directly and not dragging them into the mix, because the last thing they need is to become targets themselves. They've got their own stuff to deal with, especially with oil prices and trying to keep their economies stable. Even though the Gulf states are publicly condemning the attacks, everyone knows they're not exactly crying over Israel giving Iran a headache. It's just politics. Publicly, they're all about peace and neutrality. But privately, a lot of them aren't too sad to see Iran get checked. It's like everyone's playing their own game, trying to look clean on the outside while handling business behind closed doors. Now, back in Iran, people are pretty riled up. There's this narrative going around that Israel didn't achieve much with these strikes, and some officials are pushing the idea that it was all a PR stunt by Israel to look tough. But at the same time, you've got this underlying tension, like Iran might just be waiting for the right moment to hit back in a way that really hurts. And let's be real, Iran isn't known for letting things go. They've got this long history of playing the long game, waiting until everyone's guard is down before making their move. So even if they're playing it cool now, nobody really believes it's over. The question is just when and how they'll strike back, and whether it's going to be something direct or through one of their proxy groups in the region. So yeah, it's a mess. You've got Israel trying to balance its own issues, Iran playing the patience game, and everyone else just trying to avoid getting dragged into the chaos. But with all the moving pieces and political drama, it's anybody's guess what the next big move is going to be. Now, looking at the bigger picture, it's clear both sides are playing some serious chess here. Israel's trying to send a message to Iran, but they're not going all out. It's like they're testing the waters, seeing how much they can push without triggering a full-blown war. At the same time, they're keeping an eye on internal pressure, especially with critics at home wanting to see more decisive actions. Iran, on the other hand, is all about maintaining their image of resilience and strength. They've been hit, but they're spinning it like a minor setback, nothing they can't handle. And with all this talk about their air defenses intercepting most of the incoming missiles, they're trying to sell this narrative of being ready for anything. But let's be real, deep down, everyone knows they're not going to just let it slide. One thing that's got everybody talking is whether Iran's going to lean on its allies or proxy forces in the region. We're talking groups like Hezbollah or even factions in Iraq. That's where things could get really unpredictable, because if Iran decides to play it smart and hit back indirectly, it could turn this regional tension into a much bigger mess. And if Israel keeps up the pressure, we might see them doubling down on their support to these groups as a way to hit back without getting their hands too dirty. Meanwhile, back in Israel, some officials are already trying to spin this as a win. They're pointing to the precision of their strikes and claiming they've seriously weakened Iran's military capabilities, but some analysts aren't buying it. They're saying this feels more like a symbolic move, a show of force that looks good in the headlines but might not change much on the ground. And with all the speculation about Trump coming back into the White House, there's this big question mark over how U.S. foreign policy might shift. If Trump's in charge again, a lot of folks think Israel could get more aggressive, knowing they'd have America backing them up in a big way. For now, though, it seems like Israel's playing it a bit safer, trying not to bite off more than they can chew with everything else going on. As for the Gulf states, they're just trying to keep the peace on their side of things. They know that if things spiral out of control, their oil supply lines could be at risk, and that's the last thing they want. So, you're seeing this mix of public statements condemning the attacks while privately hoping this whole thing stays contained. The wild card in all of this is Iran's nuclear ambitions. They're inching closer to getting the bomb, and that's got everybody on edge. Some experts are even saying that if Iran officially declares itself a nuclear power, it could completely change the dynamics in the region. Israel's biggest fear is a nuclear-armed Iran, and if that happens, all bets are off. In the background, you've got rumors swirling about secret back-channel talks and deals, with Israel and Iran maybe trying to manage the tension without letting it explode. That Axios report about Israel giving Iran a heads-up is a huge deal, because it hints that both sides might be coordinating to avoid crossing any red lines, at least for now. It's like they're both playing a game of chicken, waiting to see who's going to make the first serious move. And while all this is going down, you've got regular folks in both Israel and Iran just trying to make sense of it all. In Israel, some are worried about what comes next, especially with the conflict in Lebanon draining resources and focus. In Iran, there's this mix of anger and defiance, with people rallying around their government's narrative but also anxious about the possibility of more strikes. At the end of the day, it's all a big balancing act. Israel's trying to assert its power without overextending, and Iran's trying to maintain its image of resistance while steadily building up its military and nuclear capabilities. Both sides are caught in this cycle of provocation and response, with neither wanting to be the one to back down. And the rest of the world is just watching, waiting to see how it all plays out. It's a tense standoff, and everyone knows that one wrong move could set off a chain reaction nobody's ready for. As the dust settles, analysts are digging deeper into what these moves mean for the region's future. There's a growing feeling that neither Israel nor Iran wants a full-on war, but they're both stuck in a game of brinkmanship. It's like they're each daring the other to make the first major move, knowing that if things really pop off, it could be disastrous for everyone involved. Behind closed doors, Israel's military planners are probably weighing their options and trying to gauge how Iran might react in the long run. The Israeli government knows they can't afford to look soft in front of their people, especially with domestic tensions rising. They've got to show strength but also avoid opening up new fronts they can't handle. Meanwhile, their intelligence community is likely working overtime, gathering data to stay ahead of whatever moves Iran might make next. For Iran, it's not just about showing strength to their enemies, it's about maintaining internal support and credibility. The Iranian government's narrative has always been about standing up to external threats and being a force to be reckoned with in the region, so they can't afford to look like they're backing down, especially with all the international eyes on them. But at the same time, they know that a direct, large-scale response could bring down a storm of consequences they might not be ready for. Then there's the wild card of Hezbollah in Lebanon. They've got a long history of being Iran's ace in the hole when it comes to putting pressure on Israel. If things start getting really tense, some believe Iran could use Hezbollah to escalate the situation without directly involving their own forces. It's a risky move, though, because Israel's got no qualms about hitting Hezbollah hard if they feel threatened. On a broader level, regional players like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are keeping their heads down, watching and waiting to see how this all plays out. They've got their own long-standing beefs with Iran, but they're also not looking to invite any retaliation that could mess with their oil supply or stability. A lot of Gulf states have been pushing for economic growth and diversification, and the last thing they want is a new conflict screwing up their plans. In Iraq and Syria, the vibe is more of resignation than anything. Both countries have been used as chess pieces in these bigger power games for years now, and this latest round of tensions isn't helping. Iraqi and Syrian leaders are probably worried about their territories being used as launch pads or battlefields in this escalating drama, especially given the fragile state of both countries. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the Biden administration's trying to walk a fine line between supporting Israel and avoiding getting pulled into another Mideast crisis. They're watching closely, but there's definitely an understanding that anything more than rhetorical support could complicate the already strained US-Iran relations. And with 2024 elections on the horizon, US foreign policy is in a bit of a holding pattern, which adds another layer of uncertainty to the whole situation. If there's one thing most observers agree on, it's that both Israel and Iran are playing a long game. They're trading blows, testing each other's limits, and gathering intelligence, but neither side wants to be the one to take that irreversible step that could spark an uncontrollable conflict. It's all about timing and perception, showing strength while holding back just enough to keep the situation from spiraling. This means we're probably in for more of these tit-for-tat moves, with both sides trying to project strength and resolve without crossing a line they can't come back from. Cyber attacks, covert operations, and small-scale strikes are all on the table as each side tries to gain the upper hand without triggering a bigger disaster. For the rest of the region, it's all about damage control. Countries like Jordan are making it clear they don't want any part of this, and even Egypt is likely trying to stay neutral, focusing on its internal issues and regional stability efforts. There's a sense that everyone's on edge, trying to avoid becoming collateral damage in a conflict that nobody really wants. And through all of this, the average person in these countries is just trying to keep up. In Israel, there's a lot of nervousness about where things are headed, especially with all the other internal issues they're facing. Over in Iran, people are feeling the pinch of sanctions and economic pressure, and many are wondering how much more their government can handle before something has to give. At the end of the day, it feels like everyone's walking on eggshells, trying to avoid a slip-up that could set off a chain reaction. But with so many moving parts and so much tension in the air, it's hard to see how this delicate balance is going to hold for long. The big question on everyone's mind is, what happens next? Will Israel push harder and force Iran's hand? Will Iran look for ways to strike back indirectly? And what will the US and other big players do if things really start to unravel? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, this situation isn't going away anytime soon. Some insiders are hinting that Israel's recent strike wasn't just about military goals, it was also a signal to its allies and adversaries alike.